Cruisers have started to become a little bit more popular here in the Philippines. Celebrities like Kuya Kim and even LA Tenorio have been seen riding around in their Harleys. However, you don't normally see many Indians around, with the exception of perhaps Sam YG. So the question is, will the Scout Rogue make Indian a worthy adversary to the Milwaukee-based company? Let's find out in this episode of Beyond the Ride. Indian motorcycles have a rich history dating back to 1901. Since then, it's been a symbol of American motorcycling excellence, known for its powerful engines, distinctive design, and a legacy deeply rooted in the motorcycle culture. Indian has captivated riders for over a century. The brand's popularity stems from a combination of classic styling and a commitment to delivering a premium riding experience. What sets Indian motorcycles apart is its dedication to craftsmanship, producing bikes that not only perform exceptionally, but also carry a sense of heritage that resonates with enthusiasts worldwide. Looks-wise, I think it's such a badass motorcycle. I mean, I can imagine this in the movie Expendables or something along those lines. I mean, it's got this little fairing up front, this mini 8 bars, a 19-inch front wheel, which the typical Scout comes with 16s, so they increased this a little bit. And I love it in this blacked out colorway, well, except for the exhaust, but it does look absolutely badass. Badass is the only term I can think of when I look at this bike. The bike is powered by a liquid-cooled transfer 60-degree 1100cc V-twin, which rips out 100 ponies at 8,100 RPM and 102 Nm of torque at 8,100 RPM. Brakes up front are a 2-piston caliper 298mm disc, while the rear is equipped with a single piston caliper 298mm disc. Front suspension is a 41mm telescopic fork, and for the rear, you get dual shocks. Now, these have actually been upgraded to Öhlins. Wheels are cast black, as mentioned, 19 at the front and 16 for the rear. Tires are Metzeler Cruise Tex. The seat height, well, as you can see, is very low. It's 650mm. I'm 5'6", with a 764mm inseam, and that is what it looks like. As you can see, forward controls, so when you're riding, it's kind of like this. I typically don't like forward controls, but for some reason, these aren't so bad. Now, the weight of the bike is 545 pounds, which is actually on the heavy side. And because it's low to the ground, it's not really much of an issue. The fuel tank capacity is 12 liters, and you can get up to 17 kilometers per liter depending on how you ride. And that is actually not so bad considering the displacement of the bike. It's a pretty bare bones bike. There's no fuel gauge, there's no riding modes, there's no riding aids, and I actually don't mind it because the type of bike that it is, that's really what cruisers tend to be, right? You don't really have much technology. In fact, if you look at the gauge cluster, it is very basic and fundamental. I mean, I don't mind it though, not at all. Now, the build quality is pretty solid. I mean, it's metal all around, and that's actually what makes it heavy, right? However, the controls, you could probably get better grips than this. Also, I think the switches could have been a little bit more special. They just look pretty standard to me, but considering the type of bike that it is, I don't mind it so much, but it would have been nicer that if it was a little bit more, I guess, yeah, special is probably the word that I can think of at the moment. Now, when you get the bike from the showroom floor, the side mirrors are actually upside down, facing that way, of course. But I don't like that. I don't see anything with it, and I know there are people like Early who don't look at the side mirrors anyway. But I kind of needed it when I used this on the expressway. That's why I had them put it upside, right side up. Now, if you notice in the rear, there's no seat for a pillion or rear foot pegs. However, you can actually purchase a kit that will add that in case you want to take an extra person on the bike. And you may also notice that there is no chain. There is a belt. And when you swap the two if you use a belt or if you use a chain. It really does the same thing, except that the belt is a little bit more, well, I guess, smoother, and it's also something that's going to be less maintenance than the chain. Now, in my experience, I felt like the bike was a lot smoother than I had anticipated, and I assume that's because of the all-in suspension and the belt as well. All right, so let's do a sound test. However, I want to point out that that's no longer stock.
Let's talk about the seat. It actually looks great, doesn't it? I mean, it kind of holds you in position, and it's nice and plush and super comfortable. And even though it's got forward controls, the ergonomics on the bike, as I mentioned, it's not really my thing, but I don't mind it so much. It's actually pretty comfortable. Now, it takes a little bit of getting used to use the baby 8 bars, but after a couple of minutes, it's going to be something that's going to seem pretty natural. And the truth is, I think it actually gives a nice presence on the bike. You get a little bit more of a commanding feel. And if it's got the normal handlebars, you're gonna have to be forward. You're gonna have to lean forward a little bit more. So this, I actually don't mind this position at all. Now, I've taken the bike on a semi-long ride and on some very light twisties, and it does lean in the corners really, really well. And I thought that typically with bigger tires, with larger tires, it's a little bit more difficult to lean the bike. But I was informed that because this has 19s, and because of the way the bike is set up, it actually helps the bike lean a little bit more. So I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a lot more nimble than I had anticipated, and it's relatively easy. I thought this would be a little bit more of a struggle, but it's not at all. It's a really easy bike to ride in twisties. However, you can't lean the bike too much because you are gonna start scraping the foot pegs, and if you lean the bike too much on the right side of the bike, you're actually gonna start scraping the pipes, which is not something that is ideal. Now, I do find myself using the rear brake a little bit more than I typically would on other bikes, and that's just to stop the bike in a full stop. Now, the brakes work fine, but for some reason, I tend to use the rear brake a little bit more. And I guess it's just something that you get used to because the bike is pretty heavy, so to be able to get the bike in a full stop, you're gonna have to apply a little bit of pressure on the rear brake, just for safety purposes. It's a real joy at the lower revs. It's got some very, very good grunt and some nice, good pull as well, which is typical for bikes like this. It does feel proper. I'm not a cruiser guy. I'm not gonna pretend that I know everything about cruisers, but in my head, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Now, using it in the city wasn't really an issue for me. Now, I didn't feel that much heat coming from the engine. I did, but not a crazy amount. I thought it was going to be a lot hotter, and this was actually something that was very tolerable for me. I also think that, well, I know that if the side mirrors were actually the way it was supposed to be positioned, which is facing down, it would have been so much easier to filter. But it's just that I prefer the side mirrors up because I just get a better, I see better like this. But I think that if it was facing down, it would be a whole lot easier to really get through the traffic in the stoplights. Now, I also use the bike at night because I wanted to test the halogen headlight. And the truth is, it actually works fairly well. But that's like the first thing that I would probably change in this bike. I would get an LED headlight. Yes, it works fine, and I was in places where there's street lights and other motorists, so it wasn't an issue whatsoever. I think that all bikes today should be equipped with LEDs. That's just the way it is. I mean, it's a safety issue, and it's just so much easier to ride when it's brighter at night. Now on the highway, this was an absolute joy to cruise along at the speed limit. There's a lot of enjoyment from the bike that is when you're not going super quick. Although the bike can definitely get up and go, I found that going really fast on this bike is not the most ideal because I feel like a parachute with the air blasting me. You know, that little fairing in the front doesn't really stop the air. If you're going at a pretty quick pace, it's a little bit, you really will feel the wind. But at a cruising pace, this bike is absolutely such a joy to use. But if you want to, you can push it a little bit more. Now it does have a presence on the road, and it kind of, commands a level of respect. Whether that's just in my head or not, I actually really don't know. But I feel like it really does. Like when you're riding around, it feels like people are kind of, afraid of you or just staring at you. But it does have that sense of command when you take this bike out on the road. The challenge for Indian really here in the Philippines is brand recognition. I was filling up the bike at the gas station, and the fuel attendant asked me if it was a Harley. Now, despite it clearly saying Indian on the side. So I had to explain to him that it's actually the rival of Harley and it's called an Indian. Then he asked me if the bike was made in India. I told him no, it's not, and I didn't really have that much time to explain further. But that just shows that the Indian motorcycle brand is just not as known here in the Philippine market, and that's that kind of it kind of sucks because this is such a good brand, it's such a good manufacturer, and this is such a fun bike to use, and people really need to get to know it a little bit more. Now, I have really enjoyed this bike a lot more than I had anticipated. That's the truth. It's a visceral feeling that you get. It's fun. It's just a lot more fun than I thought it would be. And it really feels like you're riding a badass motorcycle. And in a way, it makes me feel like a badass myself.
All right, so in conclusion, I gotta admit, I enjoyed this bike a whole lot more than I thought I would. Now, I don't know if it's because I've matured through the years. Point out that I use the word mature, not age. And my taste in motorcycles have evolved. I'm not too sure. But when I'm riding the bike, it feels like all the senses are activated. And it's a lot more enjoyable than I thought I would. Seriously, a lot more enjoyable than I thought it would be. And with a price tag of 999,000 Philippine pesos, the Indian Scout Rogue is not far from the price of the Harley Davidsons. So I think this deserves a shot. I think it really does. I think it's, there's a certain cool factor about the bike that some other bikes don't have. I mean, you just don't see too many of these, and I think that's actually a positive instead of a negative. Now, for more information about this bike and other MCs out there, log on to www.motodeal.com.ph. It has been Gene Rufino. Hope you guys enjoyed going beyond the ride.